know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
We'll get to all the NHL stuff because that's what the show is supposed to do. But of course, we are coming to you after Super Bowl weekend. What a game. What a halftime show. Siege, how did you enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday?
I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I actually missed the halftime show, so I feel like that's my bad. I'm going to have to go back.
Man, what? Dude, like, I think the Prince halftime show is probably the best one that's ever been done. I know Beyonce had hers and Destiny's Child too. That Super Bowl halftime show was the most enjoyable experience I've had watching that show ever since I became a football fan. I loved it.
Were you pumped for it going in? Like, did you have high expectations or?
I don't know about high expectations. I was just like the assembly of artists. So like Dre, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, Eminem, Mary J. Blige was like, okay, this is pretty big. And then they kind of surpassed those expectations. And the special guests that they had there too, like that hyped me up as well. That was super cool to see. Like 50 Cent showing up, recreating the In the Club video. I was like, man, that was sick. You see Anderson .Paak on the drums. I was like, nah, like this was nuts. I knew he was going to be part of that too. I was like, there's no way you have the performance with Dre in California and you don't have Anderson .Paak involved in some fashion. I was like, I should have bet on that, to be honest with you. I really should have bet on that.
Did you bet on anything or did you just keep it no?
No point spreads. I learned my lesson from the championship weekend that Pierre LeBrun, who I'll mention later in this podcast, kind of, pushed me to do point spreads. But no, I said, you know what? I'm sticking with just letting everyone know who I'm picking to win the Super Bowl. And that's sufficient for me. I did not make any bets, but maybe this year I'll make a bet for something else.
Yeah. What a mistake by me, though. I switched locations at the halftime, so I missed the halftime show. I didn't miss any of the game by doing it that way, but that was a rookie move from a veteran podcaster.
But then again, you're not even like a big like music guy anyway.
I know, but I do usually like it. I was out in public too, so you don't get to enjoy it the same way as if you're at home. I feel like, even with the game, like I did enjoy the game, but you're saying what a great game it was. Like, I just feel like you're kind of half looking up, like there's chaos around. I didn't watch it as closely as maybe I should have, but I was hoping Joe Burrow would win. But there's many more years for Joe Burrow to go at it.
That dude, I'll say this. He is the truth. He is that dude. He is somebody who I think through this playoff experience, like I'm going to add him to my list of NFL quarterbacks that I genuinely like. He's on the list with Mahomes and like Justin Herbert and stuff. Like I earned a lot of respect for Joe Burrow this postseason. I know he did his thing in college. He's a national champion. He's a Heisman Trophy winner, but Joe Burrow, he is that dude. He is Joe Cool. He is a personality. And I think that's why we all like him so much.
Yeah, and he helped win me a fantasy football title this year too. So
yes,
I picked him late because everyone was sleeping on him. He got injured last season, and that helped me win a championship. So thank you, Joe.
I don't think we mentioned this. We both are fantasy football champions in our respective leagues. Congratulations, sir.
Wow, thank you, and congrats to you. I mean, no one ever wants to hear about your fantasy team. I think I've played like 12 years. I'm in 2 pools now. I've won 3 times through 2 pools in 12 years. Anyway, it's pretty rare to win. But those flags fly forever. I got Wen and Romo. The flag's flying now.
To make it about the NHL, how are you doing in NHL fantasy?
I don't play any NHL fantasy. It's too close to work.
Really?
It's too involved, too. Like, the games are every day. Like, what I love about the NFL is, I'm not on there every day scouring the waiver wire. Like, I just kind of set my lineup on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, check it again on Sunday. But, like, I'm not – I find that it's just the right amount of, like, it keeps me interested, but it's not a lot of – I don't feel like it's work or anything. Whereas, the NHL, I love the NHL. Don't get me wrong. I'm obviously watching games every day, but it's hard to – it just would be hard for me to be as into it. Plus, I don't have any friends that are into it. We're actually – there's a media hockey writers pool that is our fantasy football pool. And so it's a lot of my buddies that cover the NHL that we do that together, but they don't do a hockey one.
So I wonder if next year we should do like an SDP. I mean, if you're not down for it, then maybe doing an SDPN hockey fantasy pool would be pointless. But then again, considering the amount of shows they're adding to the SDPN, it might still be worth it. We just might not have you.
Yeah, maybe I'll be the commissioner or something.
That's possible. That's entirely possible. I'd be down for it. So we'll add that to the list of ideas here. SDPN fantasy pool, whether it's hockey or I'd be down for a football one too. But we'll table that idea for now, and we'll get to the list of topics on the CJ show. Speaking of fantasy, I'm sure anyone who has Nazem Kadri on their team is doing pretty well this year. You kind of tweeted about him over the weekend. He does have 62 points in 43 games. He's fourth in league scoring. He's having a really good year. He ended up going to the All-Star game. I'm just curious, considering the fact he's in a contract year, right? Like, is it too soon to kind of get a sense of what's going on in his head? Does he want to stay in Colorado? Does he want to go to a contending team? Like, I'm kind of curious about Nazem Kadri and his future.
Well, I think that it's such a strange year to make sense of, right? I mean, by no means am I knocking him down a peg, but he's obviously on a great team. Like, if you saw the goal he scored on Sunday, Cale Makar makes an unreal pass to him there. And so obviously he's benefiting from being on a high octane team, but he still has 62 points in 43 games. His best ever in 10 previous seasons is 61 points. I mean, how do you make sense of that in his 11th or 12th season, depending on how you gauge the start of his career, that he has this just outlier year? He's always been a great player. He twice scored 30 goals for the Leafs. At that point in time, they were using him as their matchup center, so he wasn't even really being given sort of a prime offensive role because it was young Austin Matthews on the team at that stage that was kind of being put in the more offensive minutes. And so, I don't know what his next contract looks like. Like, I don't know how you value this if you're a team when it comes to free agency, but I'm reasonably sure that Nazem Kadri is going to wait till July. He's going to get to that market, and he's going to see what those contracts might look like, what teams are thinking. It's not a matter of not wanting to stay in Colorado. I think all things being equal, he'd love to stay there, but this is a big time for him business-wise. His last deal ended up being very valuable. He's $4.5 million on a 6-year contract, and he's outperformed that with the way he's played in those years. And so this is his last chance to make some of the bigger money. And I think he's, I'm not saying he's chasing the money, but I think he's going to see what the league thinks of him. And so, the fact he switched agents recently to Darren Ferris, kind of, I think is a window into that thinking. Darren it's one of the things he does, with his clients. I think he usually advises them to wait till the end to see, basically use the leverage you have in this case. And so maybe there's a world he can stay in Colorado. I don't really see it because they got other guys to pay. Nathan McKinnon's contract's around the corner. Cale Makar just signed a big extension that kicks in. You have to make hard choices in a salary cap. And I think ultimately that's going to make this his last year with the Avs. But what a last year. I mean, that team might win a Stanley Cup, and certainly he's a big part of their success.
Absolutely. The thing is, though, is that we're not talking about a guy who's at 27, 28, kind of entering his prime. We're talking about a guy in the prime right now, closer to exiting it. I'm curious, for whatever big money that comes his way, I mean, I'm sure some teams might still throw it at him, but I wonder how much age is a consideration into that as well.
Well, the term's going to be key, right? That's going to be probably where the negotiation gets done, the deal gets done. You're not as afraid to give him some big money on a 3-year deal, maybe. But you don't want to be giving it on a 5 or 6-year deal, just given that he's already got a 3 at the start of his age. Yeah, that's what's amazing about the season. Like, it's hard to make sense of. We don't see this happen a lot, honestly, anymore. Players in their 30s, there's still lots of good players in their 30s. Ovechkin's sort of turning back the clock this year. Even Crosby is having a very productive season. But, it's not those guys were the goats of their generation. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised by them. But for Kadri to have such a big season at this point in time, I mean, he's shooting more, he's playing more, obviously scoring more. The problem is you love this year, but you're paying him for next year if you give him the contract. And I think everybody won't expect him to repeat this. I mean, he could end up with 100 points. I wouldn't bet against him at this stage. He doesn't even have to go point a game. Or basically has to go about point a game the rest of the year to get there. So it's a cool season. I had a chance to talk to him in Vegas actually at the All-Star weekend last weekend, and Like he just was saying like how hard he's worked for it. Like I feel like he's always, I've known Nazem basically since he entered the league because he played in Toronto and I covered those teams and he's never doubted himself. Like I think one of his truly great abilities as an athlete is he just his self-belief doesn't waver, which I see as honestly, I see that as a positive. Like it could sound negative, but I certainly don't intend it that way. But he's the kind of guy that could get suspended for a playoff series, have the team lose, and not have it like affect him and negatively, like not have a carryover. And I think that was really important when he played for the Leafs, for example, where it was sort of new controversy every week. Sometimes he was a subject of it. But he never sort of lost his belief in himself. And so, one thing he kept saying, he's like, I've just worked so hard for this. And so I feel like he always believed this was coming. Maybe, the rest of the league wouldn't have thought that. I got the sense he's really appreciating it. That was his first All-Star game too. So it was just a special season for him. And what a time with that contract. That's another thing. Some guys let a contract get in their head, right? Maybe affects their performance. If anything else, that's probably fueling Nazem a little bit.
Yeah. And good luck to him this year, man. Just get all the benefits you can get out of this year. If it ends in a cup, at the very least, when you go off to another team, if it becomes the case, you can at least be happy with the fact that you've done everything you possibly can in a year. That's pretty special for Nazem. I'm happy for him. I always kind of liked him as a player. I know the whole suspension thing kind of clouds him a little bit, but like I always thought he was a good, solid player, especially when he was with the Leafs. Yeah,
he was an excellent player. Honestly, I mean, he's made good on the promise he kind of entered the league with. Right, he was a top 10 pick. Was the Montreal draft way back when? We're doing another Montreal draft, but I remember that Montreal draft. Brian Burke drafted him, and the thing too is I think he'll get paid, Julian, because you're not paying him just for his production. He's a competitive guy. He's feisty. Like you're getting, some players that have would have this kind of scoring pace. They're not necessarily giving you a whole lot else. I mean, scoring is the hardest thing to do in the game. I mean, that there's value to that, but I feel like he does bring a bit of an edge to his game too, which you'll feel more comfortable with if you're giving him that contract. But I don't know, what is it? 3 years times 7 million, 8 million. Like I think if you can keep it to 3 years, you can give him the money he's going to want. But cool story, and I'm enjoying seeing his success as well.
Were you at the Montreal draft in 2009?
Oh yeah, bud.
Lucky. That's lucky.
I did the Ottawa draft in 2008 was my first one. I was a kid then, but I remember like there's young Alex Pietrangelo and Drew Doughty, Steven Stamkos, and then Montreal. The next day, Brian Burke did a press conference. I remember at a downtown hotel. I wish I remember. I could walk you to the hotel. Like I know where about it is. I just can't think what the name was. But talk about Kadri, like the Leafs loved Kadri back then. Man, the years go quick though. Like I remember that really clearly. I was at the Montreal All-Star game too. What was that? 2012.
I forget the specific year, but that was a big year. That might have been a bit sooner.
Colder. That was the coldest I've ever been in my entire life. Like I'm not exaggerating. It was insanely cold. Like you ask anyone who was at Montreal All-Star game, that's the first thing they'll say to you. Like it was like to walk from. I was at the Marriott Chateau Champlain. Like the walk from there to Bell Center, which is like a nothing walk, felt like you were braving. You're trekking through the Antarctic or something.
2009 is when the All-Star game was in Montreal. 2009 was a wild year, so they had that and the draft.
Right. I think it was their 100-year anniversary, right?
Yes, it was. It was their 100th anniversary. The only thing I remember about the 2009 draft, aside from it being in Montreal, I was in Stratford on a class trip. I was in a theater group, and we went to Stratford for a few days. And we came back on the train, and we came back like right smack in the middle of All-Star weekend. And there are all these like NHL people like walking around the Bell Center because the train isn't too far from the Bell Center. And I met Larry Robinson and took a photo with him, and Ken Hitchcock and took a photo with him. I have photos with those two gentlemen.
There you go. Do you know what? Did you see this old tweet that was circulating around for me?
Which one?
It was from the 2009 draft, actually, it turns out. And Brian Burke, I tweeted a quote from Brian Burke, probably from that press conference I'm talking about. And he said that Tampa would trade the number 2 pick to the Leafs, but they would only do it for Luke Schenn, who the Leafs had taken 5th overall the year before, and was obviously was their top prospect at the time. And he's like, you can't make that deal. And then as history turns out, that would have been Victor Hedman for Luke Schenn.
Oof.
And as much as I actually love Luke, I love seeing him win those cups in Tampa, but I think even Luke would concede that would have been a good trade for the Leafs in hindsight. I don't know why it just recently someone just started retweeting it into my feed. Like, I don't know who went back and found this 2009 tweet from reporter Chris, but it just made me laugh. Like, I don't remember tweeting that at all. Like, I don't remember Brian Burke saying that. I'm sure he did. I wouldn't have tweeted otherwise, but what a thing that would have been. That's
really, man, you're just giving pain. I feel pain. I'm not even a Leafs fan. That sucks. You could have had Victor.
See, Brian became a friend of mine because we ended up working at Sportsnet together. But the cool thing about covering him back in the day is, like, he would just say stuff like that. Like, he would tell you what was going on. Like, he was really a personality. I know that not everyone can be that way, but it's cool as a fan when your GM tells you that. The problem is you're on the record then. Like, stuff like this can come back. Like, we don't know about what trades weren't made by other teams because their GM didn't come out and say, yeah, we could have traded for the number 2 pick, but they wanted Luke Shannon. We weren't doing that. But anyway, Brian was a character. He was great to cover. It was wild at times, but he was a fun GM.
Last thing on Brian Burke and Nazem Kadri, and then I'll get to the next topic here. Is the year Nazem Kadri, that draft, is that the year where there's like a video of him on the draft floor, I think, with Brian Murray, the Sens GM, and he's like, yeah, are you thinking of taking Nazem Kadri? And he's like, yes. And he's like, yeah, we're going to take him. Is that year? That's that year, 2009 draft. He was like, oh my God.
Basically, like, was like trash talking Ottawa, saying, like, we're taking him one pick ahead of you.
Brian Burke, truculence. That's that truculence right there. One of a kind. I wanted to talk about the Calgary Flames. We looked at them as a team under Daryl Sutter hockey, seeming to do very well. Steve Dangle last week said some things about the Leafs against them. They look like a playoff team, but I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on an article that our boy Pierre LeBrun wrote last week. He did an interview with GM Brad Treliving, and the biggest tidbit that came from it was the fact that the Flames are in the market for secondary scoring. I just want to pick your brain and get a sense of who do you think might fit the bill for Calgary, or who they've been talking to, or anything like that to kind of satisfy their needs.
Well, they've got an interesting situation, right? Because Johnny Gaudreau's an unrestricted free agent. Matthew Tkachuk's a restricted free agent. I mean, like, they have some big sort of foundational decisions coming at the end of this year. They're having, a strong season. They have the best points percentage in the Pacific Division as we're talking now. I think we would probably, if we had to pick, we'd probably put Vegas as the most likely to emerge from that division. Mm-hmm. But, if you're Calgary and the way they're playing under Daryl Sutter, I think you're starting to think like, hey, maybe this could fall in line for us. And also with the big decisions coming, it probably means some changes are coming. And so I feel like this is a year to go all in a little bit. And remember, they were in the Jack Eichel talks right till the end. Before he got sent to Vegas, Calgary was the other interested bidder there. And so, while Brad Treliving might be calling it secondary scoring, I kind of wonder if they make a bigger splash when all is said and done. I mean, you're not going to show all your cards when you do those types of interviews before before trade deadline. But, I do think that any forward of consequence that's moved before March 21st, the Flames are going to have to look pretty seriously at. And, they got one of the best lines in the league right now. Gaudreau's having a monster season. I know we haven't talked about it on the pod much, but, he's really bounced back. He's another guy like Kadri in a contract year that the timing couldn't be better. And a lot of people wondered how he would fare under Daryl Sutter, right? Just a more defensive minded coach, can be a tough coach at times. And it's worked really well. And so, I can't tell you today who they're trading for, but I would say that I would expect them to be quite aggressive at the deadline, especially if they keep playing as well as they have been, through February and into that period where a lot of these trades are going to get done. And, I think there's a lot of incentive there to be bolder, maybe than other situations, just because you're not thinking in the back of your mind, well, next year we're going to, there's a lot of uncertainty about what that team looks like moving forward. But what the team looks like right now is one of the maybe the second tier of teams, but one of the top teams in the second tier. I kind of have my Stanley Cup favorites, and Calgary's not there, but they're in that next group. And things could break their way. They get the right matchup. Someone gets upset and maybe they go on a run.
You have them as a contender is what you're saying.
A contender, but I probably got like 5 teams in the top group which is a lot. I get it. But, any of Colorado, Florida, Carolina, Toronto, Vegas, like I
Tampa Bay?
Tampa there too. Yeah. Maybe it's a bigger group than I thought, but like those are the teams. Like I think that the Stanley Cup champion comes from that group of teams, most likely. Mm-hmm. But then there is like the next phase. Like you got Minnesota, it's having a great year. Calgary, like I kind of put those teams maybe fairly or not, like a little bit below that group. Boston's sort of in that second tier group for me. Like I know they're getting there, but like their season's been a little bit. It was certainly down in the beginning. They've been much better the last stretch of games. Although they got beat 6-0 by Carolina the other day. Like it's hard to know what to make of Boston a little bit. So yeah, that's sort of how I see it breaking down. I mean, as you know, we got the Panthers to win the cup. They're the juggernaut. We the SPN bet. You, me, and producer Nick are going to get out for some nice meal if that one hits. We should do it.
I already know what I want.
That's good. So. Everyone else is playing for second because this is the Panthers' year. But yeah, that's sort of how I see it breaking down. And that's why I think though, I guess it's a tough spot to be, Brad Living, because who knows what's going to go on with, Gaudreau and how that's all going to play out. Like the longer he goes unsigned, you think the less likely he's going to stay there, but no guarantees. Who knows? It's not fait accompli at this moment. So I think that they're, like someone asked in the Ask CJ questions, one that I actually answered in my Inside the NHL column, was like, who's an under the radar team for the deadline? I picked Calgary. Like I think that they should have more motivation to be aggressive than anyone.
I did not put that question in the list of questions, so we won't be doubling up on Ask CJ, which we will get to before the
weird fruit one.
I can go to that fruit one if you'd like.
No,
absolutely.
I didn't know how to answer it. Someone said, "What kind of fruit would you be and why?" And like I spent way too long contemplating it. I actually started to write an answer and I was like, this is going to be interpreted so weirdly. So I'm just not going to give an answer.
Why would you say it's going to be interpreted weirdly?
I don't know. Like, why would you want to be any fruit?
I don't know. Just that maybe you
like, I guess
that's
fruit.
a good
Don't
point.
get me wrong. There's lots of fruits I like, but like, why would I want to be a fruit? Anyway,
I guess that's fair, right? Like, why would you want to be eaten like that in that way?
Yeah.
And if
like
you say something with, if you say you have something with seeds, like it's like what are you doing? Like, you know what? We don't have to go through that question if you don't want to.
Well, we basically just did. I just didn't give an answer. we broke it down, and I literally. That's a funny thing about the Ask CJ section, because Sundays, I got to write that column on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Obviously that's a day you kind of, you don't want to spend too long doing it. I mean, it takes a while. It's about 1,800 words usually each week, but like, it's the day you want to be chilling. And then like, sometimes a question like that comes in and I waste 20 minutes, like kicking it around in my brain. Like, what fruit would I be? And how is someone going to read this? And like, and so I actually love the weird questions. Like they crack me up sometimes. Like, like the one from Vegas last week, on a scale of whatever 0 to Pete the Boar, how hard did you get after in Vegas or something? Like I just laughed when I saw that. So I appreciate the feedback for everyone, but sometimes it takes me down rabbit holes and I just waste half my afternoon thinking about that.
My favorite, which we didn't really get to, but like someone said that they were kidnapped and the only way they could be freed is if they figure out what Jeff Carter's middle name is.
Did Jeff Carter's wife never come through for us on that?
No, she never came through, man. She never came through.
On Twitter.
Yeah, she did. I was genuinely hoping for her to just say like it's like Joffrey or something. I don't know.
We should have the CJ Show listeners should just bombard her until she answers.
I mean, respectfully, at the end of the day, it is social media. Behave yourselves, but like maybe just a polite. Be like a polite, like, hey, respectfully, just be like, hey, can we please know we're trying to figure out for the show?
But if like 15 people are asking her what her husband's middle name is, she'll probably answer at some point because she's just.
I'm like, sure, right? Or then again, I think a few people did, and she was just like, well, guys, just give me your guesses, I guess. But maybe she'll do that again. But just it's not gonna hurt, man. Like, you all know what my middle names are. We went in on our middle names already on the podcast.
You're my king.
I'm sure
you're my king,
yes,
brother.
Yes. Also, I realized after I did the pod, I put the addendum out on Twitter. Kari is not Nigerian. It is Swahili for kingly, and Alexander is my dad and my grandfather. Their middle names. Those names were in their names, so that's why I have the names I have. I don't know why I messed it up initially when I was trying to explain it earlier, but yeah, you know our middle names. It's nothing for us to know Jeff's.
I learned something important this week. Like we're all over the place. Like we are not following the script today, but
don't worry about that. We'll get to Brad Marchand and Tuukka Rask in a moment.
Did you know that producer Nick is also under 5'10"?
That doesn't surprise me. He I don't know how to explain it, but like he looked like a short king.
I haven't met him in person though, and so I didn't realize that. Obviously, I'm not known for my stature. You might be the tallest guy associated with this podcast, but you're not dunking a basketball. And so this is a bit of a short kings podcast. I didn't even know that.
Is it? What's funny is like we were going to title the last podcast "Short King" or "Short Kings," and like I was thinking about, I was like, does that mean that everyone's just going to associate us as short kings? I was like, you know what? Like, who cares? I'm like at the average. I'm at like 5'9", so like I'm at the average.
Let's lean in on it, bud. I'm 5'7", and I've never been tall. Like I wasn't like I was like the tallest kid in grade 1 and I stopped growing. Like I've just never been tall. So I've had a long time to get used to this.
Like the first time I met you in person, I was just like, okay, you're like at my height. I was like, oh shit, like it's
But I love that all three of us are short kings, brother. So like I think we got to get some merch going or something.
Oh,
can't all just be Coburg merch and Bitcoin merch. I mean, we represent more than that.
sdpn.ca, go to our store to buy some merch from us. Also, did you try to buy? I wanted to buy one of those jerseys. They made them briefly available and they just like sold out. I really wanted one. I can't even get one, and I am a part of the SDPN. Wow. Oh well,
you're not using your connections very well, but
I very much am not. I saw it in the newsletter and I was like, you know what, man, and like I just thought, you know what, I'll just get it tomorrow, and that's my fault. I should have worked on that. Hey, does this sound familiar? You got one device that lets you catch the game live, another one that lets you stream your favorite shows, and you're watching sports highlights on your phone. I know I like to do that. And you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. I want to tell you about a simple way that gets you all the entertainment that you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. No more juggling remotes. You don't need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. Get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package, but just go to directtv.com. We're still in the middle of winter. Football and basketball and hockey very much in full swing. And for many of us, there's no better way to enjoy the games than by having some skin in the game. That is why BetMGM remains the exclusive betting partner of The Athletic. And as a fan of The Athletic, you can bet $10 to win $150 plus a free 3-month subscription or extension of your subscription to The Athletic when you bet with BetMGM using our promo code. Sign up at betmgm.com and use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout to take advantage of this special offer from the king of sportsbooks. That's bet $10 to win $150 plus 3 months free from The Athletic at betmgm.com, and you have to use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout. The Athletic Pod, all in one word. New customer offer. Visit betmgm.com for terms and conditions. All right, I'll get us back on track here. One story we did not get to last week because things were kind of unfolding with it was Brad Marchand, his antics against the Pittsburgh Penguins earlier this week. An incident with him and goaltender Tristan Jarry ultimately led to a 6-game suspension that has since led to comments from Brad Marchand about it and an appeal. It is possible maybe we hear an answer to that in the coming days or today. But I just want your general thoughts on what happened with Brad Marchand, Tristan Jarry, and everything else that's followed since.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly Brad feels like his past, colored the decision, informed the decision. I think that's true. I mean, that's part of what they do at the Department of Player Safety. They consider who's doing it and why. They're trying to, look at events through that ways. And I think so. It's so different. Remember, like Jason Spezza earlier this season got a 6-game suspension. He ended up getting it reduced by a couple games. He'd played over 1,000 games in the league without ever being suspended. I think the fact that Brad Marchand has the history does, he's kind of proving their point. Like he feels like they've gone excessive there, but I think they're sort of saying, look, man, you've been warned a lot. You've been suspended a lot. And to his credit, a lot of that stuff happened a long time ago. Like I think he's cleaned up his game significantly from the early parts of his career. But I don't think that this has much chance of being reduced, honestly, just because of who he is and the process that goes into those rulings. And yeah, I mean, I get that he doesn't like it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of games, but when you have a history that tends to be how punishment works, right? You get treated with more leniency when you haven't shown a pattern of behavior. And as I say, look, we're talking about it. Like I think Brad Marchand's going to be a Hall of Famer when his career's done. Honestly, if you start looking at the numbers, you look at how great he's been the last number of seasons. Like if he continues on that trajectory, he's got a strong case to get there. And so I got all kinds of respect for his game, but he does have that past history. And, when he does cross the line, it's been well documented. And I think I think they're sending him a message with that 6-game suspension. Yeah. If someone else did it, it's not going to be 6 games, but that's not the point. It wasn't someone else who did it.
Brad Marchand is what Charlie Murphy would describe as a habitual line stepper. If you get my drift, he's a habitual line stepper. He's always kind of teetering over the line, doing something that he shouldn't be doing. So like for him to just be like, yeah, like, I don't know about the way that they're punishing me. I'm just kind of looking at him just like really, dude, like you didn't expect you were going to get this.
Right. No one wants to miss games. I can't remember how much money it was. It was $150,000 or something like that. It was anyway, serious dough. Like I get that he wants to get that back, but it's kind of a futile defense in my opinion. And ultimately he's going to just take his medicine and move on.
Yeah, that's what he's just going to have to do. Staying in Boston, another quick hit here. Tuukka Rask, who tried to come back earlier this calendar year. He would always been battling some injuries, but he was training with the Boston Bruins. They eventually signed him, but it looked as if he is not able to continue, I think, with the latest setback. So he has announced his retirement. Any thoughts on Tuukka Rask? And is he a Hall of Famer in your eyes?
Well, he was the part of one of the more lopsided trades in NHL history.
Yes.
With the Leafs having drafted him, deciding to keep Justin Pogge, who they drafted at the time was Canada's World Junior goalie, and then gave him away for Andrew Raycroft, I believe. And anyway,
yes,
Tuukka goes on and plays 500 plus games in Boston, career .921 save percentage. It's funny. He was always a controversial. I never quite understood it, but like among the fans of the Bruins, he kind of had this reputation like he can't win the big game. I don't know that that's fair. I was at Game 7 in the 2019 Cup. Like I know St. Louis won the Cup in Boston, but Boston started strong in that game. They didn't score, and then I think he had a marvelous career. I think he actually has a borderline case as well for the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he'll get there, and not a lot of goalies get into the Hall of Fame, right? And I think my view on it is not that the Hall of Fame committee hates goaltenders or doesn't know how to appreciate goaltenders. I think part of it is that goalies rarely come into the league and have like 10 great seasons in a row, right? Like there's more variance in performance. Whereas like Connor McDavid comes into the NHL and he's going to either lead the league in scoring or be like second or third 10 years in a row. And so he's very clearly one of the absolute best at his position ever to play. And it's easier to put someone like that in the Hall. Whereas, you can have a great career as a goalie, but still have like a year where you're at 904 and your team misses the playoffs, or, so much is, I think, dependent on who you play with and the team you play for. The number of guys that have had just consistently strong careers is pretty small at that position. I mean, Marty Brodeur is probably one. Patrick Waugh didn't have too many off years. But I just think that goaltending, it's a little bit more in and out. And so it's harder maybe to assess, which goalies belong in the Hall. But, I haven't looked at Tuukka's case like really close. I haven't scrutinized it, I guess I'd say. But, given that he is a career 921 goaltender, like that's hard to do over a significant number of games. He didn't win a cup as the starter. He was the backup to Tim Thomas on the 2011 Cup team. I don't know if he'll quite get there, but I certainly think he's well in the mix for the conversation. Like, he's deserving of a place to be considered. Who are the Hall of Fame goalies from this generation? We're going to have Henrik Lundqvist,
Carey Price.
Like, does Jonathan Quick get in? Like, Jonathan Quick won 2 cups, but if you look, he was actually drafted.
He fell off.
I know, but he was drafted the same draft as Tuukka Rask, 2005. And Rask has much better save percentage, but he won 2 cups. Like, I'm not chipping away at him, but I feel like if you're the goaltender of record for 2 cup teams, you're probably winning, you're probably getting in. But yeah, like, there's not a lot of goalies. It's just hard for goaltenders to get into the Hall.
I forget who asked that question to you on Ask CJ. I don't know if that's what percolated in your mind, but someone over the weekend did send you a similar question, like, why aren't there more goalies in the Hall? Before the end of the podcast, I'll make sure to mention who that tweeter was. And the only thing I can contribute with Tuukka Rask, great goalie, obviously. You are right. He was a backup for Tim Thomas, won a Stanley Cup with the Boston Bruins. One of the, we could think of him at his peak as a guy who always found himself in the top 3 in the conversation as a goalie. But my thing with, I think I mentioned the story before, Christmas Eve, I was walking around a store and I found one of those like dolls, not dolls. I don't know why I don't have it right, but one of those figures of those NHL players. And there's one of like Tuukka Rask. And I took a photo of it and I sent it to Dangle, and I was like, this guy was a Leaf. Would you want this as a late Christmas gift? And he wrote me back, Merry Christmas, asshole.
Did I tell this, like, that he once played a professional tennis player in Finland? He's a big tennis player, and the tennis player had to play with a frying pan.
Yes, you told that story. That I remember. That was a funny story.
Apparently the frying pan hangs over the bar, still in the bar, like where they made this bet. And the professional tennis player won the game with a frying pan.
That's a frying? Like, I don't get why. Look, I mean, hey, look, you know what? Stranger things have happened.
You could do with a professional tennis player, because you have to
play with their left,
I guess. But anyway, Tuukka's a great character. He had a great career.
He absolutely did. I'm going to bring back a segment before we get to Ask CJ that I think worked the last time we did it. The trading pile. I'm just going to mention some names. Tell me what's the latest trade chatter around them, and maybe we'll get some fans excited about some trades about 5 weeks away from the NHL trade deadline.
Trade center.
Yes. Trading pile number 1. This person was just placed on injured reserve. But they're only going to be out a week. Ben Sherratt. What's the trade chatter around him?
It's been significant. There's been a lot of interest in Sherratt throughout the season. I think Montreal's looking for a return similar to what David Savard got Columbus last year at the deadline. So you're looking at a first-round pick plus something else, most likely, if they're able to get the market there. The good news, you're right, Sherratt suffered an ankle injury in the game Saturday afternoon against Columbus, but from what I'm hearing, it's not too serious. So if anything, I think they just want to wrap him in bubble wrap at this point and, get him healthy to the deadline. I mean, we all know what the season is about in Montreal. And he's probably one of their bigger assets just because he's on a contract that contending teams can add, plays sort of a physical style that I think teams, gearing up for the playoffs are going to want to add. And he's expiring, right? It's some of the other players like a Jeff Petrie who Montreal will put on the market. It's just more complicated because he's got a number of years on his deal. So it's harder for teams to absorb, him being traded. So yeah, Sherratt, I'm confident will be moved. I think he'll get at least a first round pick, and maybe that trade happens sooner than later with the little injury scare. Just kind of a reminder to the Canadiens management about the potential perils of rolling him out there every night because it is a physical game.
That is true. Pat, actually, before I finish, how many teams for Ben Sherratt? Because it looks as if there's like a whole bunch of teams who are interested in him.
Yeah, I don't have the number. Like I think I've mentioned, like I know the Leafs have called on him. There's a lot of teams. Like I think it's funny because I see he's maligned on Twitter. I see, but he's I think he fits a specific need that a lot of contending teams feel they have. You're not bringing him in. You're probably play him on your third pairing, frankly. If you're a team that thinks you can win the Stanley Cup, you probably got 4 better defensemen than him. But, he's big and physical, and the playoffs is hard. It's a different game. Style that can win in the regular season doesn't always win in the playoffs. And so I think it'll be a number of teams. There's been interest in him all year long. Like I think because he was one of the teams, Montreal's season's been such a disaster. You were confident if you were a GM in November, December, that there would be a seller, and he's an obvious piece to be sold.
That's true. Pavel Zacha in New Jersey is next on the trading pile.
Yeah, Jeff Merrick, I saw had a report that Vancouver's interested. I mean, he's just in an interesting spot in his career because he's 1 year from UFA, Zacha. So he kind of controls the circumstances a little bit in that he could just sign a qualifying offer and walk himself to UFA in summer 2023. And so New Jersey's going to have to consider that. They've also got some younger players, and he would be a nice piece. We'll see if Jeff's report on Vancouver is right, but you can see why the Devils would at least be looking at that kind of move, just because it's all about managing your asset. And it's start of the career, the teams control a lot of the leverage in these negotiations. The deeper you get in, the players got more mechanisms to make more money.
What about Vitaly Kravtsov, the Rangers prospect? He's still under Rangers. They still have his rights, I believe. They
still have his rights. And, earlier in the year, he'd asked for a trade. That kind of cooled off a little bit. But I do think, New York's a team that's going to be a buyer at the deadline. He's one of the things they can buy with. He's their credit card as they go into the shopping mall a little bit, in addition to their draft picks and a few other prospects they have. And so, there's definitely been some interest in him, but he's a prospect that never met his didn't meet the hype with the Rangers. And now you get deeper into the career. And so how they view him and how the other teams view him hasn't fallen in line because they still view him as sort of a blue chip. And I think there's some question about that around the league, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him traded as part of, whatever buying that the Rangers do at the deadline.
Nick Ritchie of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, his stock's way down too. It just hasn't worked out. The Leafs signed 4 forwards in the offseason. 3 of them have hit. And the 4th one is Nick Ritchie, who's, just never found a place in the lineup. He started with Austin Matthews on the top line, progressively fell down the lineup as time went on, and now he's not even playing games. The trick here is he's got a $2.5 million cap hit. And so, the Leafs, I think, are only going to retain so much on that in trading him. And you're trading a distressed asset, essentially, a player who hasn't performed too well for you. He's still young, though, 20, 25, 26 years old. So I think that there's a world he gets traded, but it's not an easy move. And the thing the Leafs would be balancing is if they have to give up, if they have to sweeten the pot too much, it might just be worth holding on to him and buying out the final year of his contract, because that would only count next year $300,000 against the cap. And so, I think that's kind of the line that's being balanced here as they work through those trade discussions.
Sorry, did I hear that right? $300,000 against the cap?
Next year, yeah. So instead of $2.5 million to be a player, he'd be $300,000 bought out next year. So it's a $2.2 million savings, which I'm sure they'll buy him out unless there's some dramatic rise from the ashes moment here. There's injuries and he gets back in the lineup and finds his game. Barring that, I would think that's where he's headed, unless they can find a way to move him.
I didn't realize that it could go that low in terms of a salary allotted if you buy out a guy. I didn't realize it could get down to $300,000. I always just assumed that it could only go down to the minimum salary. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then the following season he would be $1.1 million.
Sheesh.
But it's still worth probably doing if you don't feel like you can play for your team, right? I mean, it's like the Leafs. well documented, are always doing the tango with the salary cap ceiling. And so that money will be valuable for them, whether they're signing Jack Campbell in the offseason or for other additions that they're pursuing. I sort of feel like, because where they are with the cap, like they had to make those 4 forward signings, like they had holes to fill. The fact 3 of them worked out, Michael Bunting, Andre Kasha, David Kampf have all really fit in nicely with the team on sort of bargain-ish contracts. If you hit on 3 out of 4 when you got to sign 4, I think you're doing pretty well, all things considered. I mean, I'm not defending the Richie signing per se, but they were bargain shopping, so they weren't going to walk out of there with classy threads on free agency day.
That's true. A final member of the trading pile for this Monday edition of the CJ Show, Marc-Andre Fleury. That's a name we've discussed a lot on this show.
It is. And, what's interesting about his situation, it doesn't sound like there's really been much talk between he and the team about whether he'll be traded. Him and his agent, I don't think, have gone there. And really, we don't see a lot of goalies move at the deadline. Here you have a potentially elite goalie. I mean, obviously, Marc-Andre Fleury is coming towards the end of his career, but, he's still pretty high-end performer. And, I don't know if he'll be traded just because, usually contending teams have their goaltending sewn up. There was a time, I'd heard the Colorado was quite interested in him, was maybe going to flip Darcy Kemper somewhere else as part of that. Well, Colorado, they barely lost in a month and a half. Like they, they just keep winning. So, and certainly, I saw yesterday Jared Bednar had some nice things to say about Darcy Kemper. So, maybe that situation looks a little different. And so it seems like Fleury is going to probably come down to the wire unless, a contending team has a serious injury to their top goalie in the next couple of days. Maybe the timeline will change, but barring that, I think it's going to go to the wire and, see if there's a fit for Mark somewhere else.
Before actually, I kind of lied about making that the segment before we get to Ask CJ. I think Craig Berube also got an extension last week too. I should have mentioned that at some point earlier on, but wondering if you have any thoughts on that before we get to Ask CJ.
Well, he earned his extension, right? I mean, went into this year, it's not a comfortable place for a coach when you're coaching in the final year, and the Blues have had a great season. So 3 years, he's making the good money now. I mean, it's good for him. And, we've seen the value of that. But this was a week where 2 coaches were fired, right? And, getting those extensions is big because it doesn't guarantee he's going to get to coach all 3 seasons beyond this one, but at least he'll be getting paid for them. And I think well earned for him. I mean, he won a Stanley Cup as an interim head coach, and shown that he's got some staying power there with how well the team's performed. I think maybe even a little bit above what outside expectations were at the Blues this year. They're kind of below the radar. I didn't even mention them when we were doing the tier 2 sort of cup contenders. Like they probably deserve a spot in there too, and I overlooked them. I just sort of a team that's under the radar right now.
People, it's Julian here with a message from Athletic Greens. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient and daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. It's not a fun time. In just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day, that's it. That's literally it. That's amazing. No need for a million different other pills and supplements and all that extra stuff. Athletic Greens is it. To make it easy, Athletic Greens will give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your very first purchase. All you have to do, visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. It's CJ's last name. How easy? It doesn't get any easier than that. athleticgreens.com/Johnston to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
That is very true. And with that, we've concluded most of these segments. So it's time for Ask CJ. We do this every Monday. We take your questions, whether on Twitter or on Discord. Let's start with this one from Tricky Ricky 58. Which NHL player would you compare to Joe Burrow to?
Austin Matthews.
Okay. I saw that coming.
It seems pretty obvious to me, but let's not overthink it. I mean, Austin's got his own style, certainly has some swagger too. And it's maybe not a perfect comparison, but I think they're the 2 most alike in that regard. I mean, there's not many NHL players that are really open about their sort of fashion interests. And Austin has been from the minute he entered the league. He tries by very cautious NHL standards, has tried some risky outfits and things. And so, I think he reminds me most of Burrow that way.
Okay. In your initial prompt for questions on Twitter, one of the things you were open to being asked about, chili recipes. So Montreal Design on Twitter asked you, how hot do you go with your chili?
I got to be like about a 5 out of 10. I don't mind hot or spicy foods, but if I eat them, I need many napkins around because everything comes out my nose, out my eyes. So I can't handle super, super spicy. Again, it's not that I don't like the taste of it or anything. It's just I become a mess pretty quickly. So if I'm trying to keep an appearance up, then I can only go about 5 out of 10 on chili.
I think you'd have liked the chili I made on Sunday for Super Bowl Sunday. So I guess next time you're in town, I'll make some chili.
You know when the last time I made chili is when I worked at Wendy's in high school.
Oh yeah, back in the day when you were at Wendy's.
That was literally the last time I personally made chili. I've eaten chili since then, but I haven't made it myself.
I promise you, my chili is better than Wendy's chili. I promise you that.
We'll see.
You don't seem so sure. I bet. All right, I'll remember that. Next question from Davey Upper on Twitter. Do you see the New York Rangers being very active this trade deadline? And what's the main position of need for the Rangers, in your opinion?
Yeah, they're getting a forward. I'd be surprised if they didn't. They've been linked to JT Miller all season long. What's interesting about JT Miller is I'm not convinced any longer the Vancouver Canucks want to trade him. He was definitely sort of made available or floated out there, whatever you want to call that. But, he's their top scorer this year. And he's still got 1 year on his contract. And so, it sounds to me like there's maybe some second guessing or some second thought being given to whether he's dealt. But even if it's not JT, I certainly think the Rangers will be a team that's out there trading for another forward to boost their group. And they're a second tier contender too, because they got a great goaltender and they've had a good season.
Next question from Boop Master Ben on Discord. In St. Louis, there is a universal hatred for Stan Kroenke and Mike Keenan. What sport figures do you hate from each of your cities?
I mean, I don't really hate anyone. I get frustrated with Jerry Jones as a Cowboys fan. I think that's not the spirit of the question being asked. I mean, if you're, I live in Toronto, so if you were talking to an old enough Leafs fan, they probably hated Harold Ballard back in the day, was sort of an owner that ran the team cheaply before there was a salary cap. And despite having a full building on all those things, but I don't personally, I'm not hating on too many people, but Jerry Jones would be my answer just because I want him to get out the way.
My answer, yeah, it's kind of tough for me. I don't know if I have an exec or personality that I hate that is, I just kind of hate. But yeah, if you talk to older Montreal sports fans, they'd probably say one of these three names or all three. Claude Brochu, Jeffrey Loria, and David Sampson. And they all had to do with the demise of the Montreal Expo. So I think something along those lines, if you talk to people in Montreal, it's one of those three people.
Right. That's the Kroenke. That's the better analogy, right, than me. I guess Kerry Fraser would be the other one for Leafs fans because he didn't call a high sticking penalty on Wayne Gretzky in the 1993 Western Conference Final, Game 6. And then Gretzky scores in overtime and the Leafs don't advance to the Stanley Cup Final. So that would be another Leaf fan. But again, that's not my personal view. Actually,
I think if you ask like a certain faction of Canadians fans, maybe it's Justin Williams because there was the 06.
There can be no Justin Williams slander on this podcast. This is a Cobra.
No, here's the thing. He's Mr. Game 7, but like in the 06 playoffs when he was with the Hurricanes, I believe he clipped Saku Koivu in the eye and he like missed the rest of the series after. The Canes had a 2-0 series lead and the Canes just kind of romped after that and they went on to win the Stanley Cup Final after that. But I don't think it's that much of a thing. Maybe Eric Cole, before he joined the Canadiens, he scored a lot against them. Brad Marchand probably fits that bill too, I guess, for fans. Yeah, I don't know. There's no like big unless
life's
I'm
too
really
short for him, man. Life's too short.
Yeah, I guess. All right, last one from McDrew on Discord. Since the announcement of Jake DeBrusk's trade request, I haven't heard a lot. Since the COVID break, he's been thriving in a third line role. and there seems to be less conflict with head coach Bruce Cassidy. Is he still going to get moved? If so, for what?
I think he'll get moved. It might not be a trade before the deadline, though. I mean, I think this is something that can probably be revisited in the offseason. There's been a lot of ups and downs for Jake and Bruce. I think it's just the way it's gone. It's the way it works for some players. Obviously, the coach is trying to push them and feels he's doing the right thing by doing that with a young player. And, Jake bristled under that. But, winning solves all. The team's won more since that trade request went in. He's found his place, as the question states. And, I don't see that happening in season. But certainly I do think, in the offseason, it's likely.
And thank you, Big Drew, for that question. And thank you to everyone else for sending in their questions. And thank you all for watching this Monday edition of the Chris Johnston Show. Enjoyed it, as always, my friend.
We even talked about hockey for a few minutes.
Yeah, we did. We found time to fit hockey talk in our busy schedules. Yes, in all seriousness, thank you all for watching, whether on YouTube or listening over wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy the Steve Dangle podcast, enjoy Agent Provocateur, enjoy Noxie and Tax, and of course, whatever brand new podcasts come out from the SDPN machine, because we are pumping out so much content. It is ridiculous. We'll be back on Thursday with a brand new episode. Stick Taps will also be part of the Thursday show, and whatever nonsense we can conjure up in between that time. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long and peace.
Chris Johnston Show. Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.